Hey guys, this is going to be the video for the 2.2 lesson. I'm going to do my very best to talk over top of the background noise that's happening here. I'm home with my kiddo today who is sick, so he's got some shows on in the background and the laundry is going. I'm so sorry. So you may hear some things, some songs, some other things in the background as I go through this. Like I said, I'm going to do my best to just talk over top of it. So this is 2.2 reflections. So we've gone through 2.1, which was all about translations, taking certain kind of shapes on a graph and just sliding them around. And now in today's lesson, instead of sliding those things around, they're going to be doing something else. Okay, so let's take a look at this definition here. A reflection is, or a flip, I'd like for you to circle that word flip. A reflection or flip is a transformation in which a figure is reflected in a line called the line of reflection. Okay, that just means it's flipping across a line, and that line is called the line of reflection. In our case, our line of reflection is going to be our axis, so either the x or the y axis. Then here it says a reflection creates a mirror image of the original figure. So it gives you an example here of what that would look like. Here we take this shape and it's going to be reflected across this line, okay? And when it reflects, it flips. So here it's showing you that this shape is being flipped along that center line, that line of reflection, and it looks like this once it's flipped to the other side. So I want you to just take note of how these things look different, because initially, if we take a look at this kind of, longer end point here, it's really close to the line, which is fine. And on the other side, it's still pretty close to the line, but here it's on the right side. And once it reflects, now it's on the left side, okay? Do you see how that happens? One word we would use to describe this is probably opposite. And that's something that you will, that's a term that you will use a lot within this lesson, is the word opposite, okay? So when you think of reflections, I want you to always think of flip and opposite, okay? So then down here in the next section, we have some other visuals happening here. And it says to tell whether the blue figure is a reflection of the red. Now, obviously, we don't have the red or the blue on our paper. So we're just going to go with one. And I'm pretty sure in this case that this is the red. And this one would be the red. So that darker one is the red. And the one that's lighter is blue, I think. So we'll just go with that for this one. So then it wants to know, does it look like this has been flipped, or maybe even become the opposite of what it was before, okay? So if you look at this red one, we end up at the blue. Does it look like this has just flipped across the line and become that new image that's on the top? Okay, the answer here is yes. If you take a look here right now, if we labeled these kind of like A, B, C, and D, these points, A, once it's been flipped, is now at the top where initially it was at the bottom. So it becomes the opposite of where it was before. B is at the top of our shape initially, but once we flip it, now it's at the bottom. C initially is at the top, now it's going to be flipped and be at the bottom. And then D was at the bottom right, and now it's at the top right. Okay, so opposite of what it was before. So this is a yes. Take a look at the second one. What would we say here? Yes or no? This should be no. But it is a kind of transformation, okay? In this chapter, transformations, okay, chapter 2 is all about, give me just a second here, transformations. In this chapter, there are 4 different kinds of transformations that we're learning about. So in 2.1, it's translations. In 2.2, it is reflections. 2.3, we will learn about rotations. And in 2.5, we will learn about something called a dilation. okay? So all of these are a kind of transformation, a change of some sort to a figure, okay? And this one here is one of those, okay? That part B example is one of those transformations. So it's not a reflection, but I hope that you remember from the first lesson that we learned that this is a translation, okay? It is a translation. Remember that a translation is a slide, okay? And if you look at this, all of these points have been slid across, okay, to these, the other side. So this is a slide. It's not a flip, okay? All right, let's take a look at the next part. In the next part, I'm just gonna move this big container here that I'm using to record on top of. I don't have a stand or anything, so it's just a big like bottle holder. Okay, so tell whether the blue figure is a reflection of the red. Same idea here, okay? The darker one is the red. So you need to decide. So take a second and you decide, is this blue one, the lighter one, a reflection of the red or the darker one? And same thing on the other side. Is the blue a reflection of the red? I want you to answer that. Okay, for the first one, the answer is no. And just like in the previous one, it is a translation. If you notice, okay, this top kind of pointed part, I don't know if you think of this as like a house kind of shape. The roof of the house is at the top, and it's still at the top down here, so nothing changed. It just slid. It's like I took this thing and just pushed it down. Okay, that's a slide, that's a translation, but not a reflection, okay? Now on the second one, your answer should be yes, it is a reflection, okay? Because if we take a look at all of these points, we have kind of this longer side versus the short side, okay? The longer side is, I guess in this case, on the bottom, and then once it flips, it's now on the top. The shorter side was initially on the top, and now it's on the bottom. I guess depending on how you look at that. I know it's a little bit sideways. Okay, so this is just kind of a visual representation of reflections, but now what we're going to get into is all of the math behind it, all of the important kind of key terms and everything. So this is something that you will really need to pay attention to. I know that it's hard to pay attention to the terms and the definitions and all of those things, but this is so important, okay? So let's read it. Reflecting figures in the x-axis and the y-axis. I don't necessarily love the use of the word in. I think it's more beneficial to you to use the word across so that you can visualize what's actually happening. So we're reflecting across the x and y axis. You can write that if you want to. And then let's look at the words. To reflect a figure across the x-axis. The x-axis, remember, is that horizontal one or the one that goes left to right. You will take the opposite, circle that word please, opposite of the y-coordinate, okay? So this is referring to your x, y. You'll have ordered pairs that represent that figure, and it's telling you to reflect it, you'll take the opposite of all of the y's in those coordinates, okay? On the other side of that, to reflect a figure across the y-axis, okay, your y-axis, remember, is your vertical or up and down. You will take the opposite, again, circle that, of the x-coordinate. So now it's saying we'll take a look at all of the points that represent that figure, and then we will take the opposite of whatever the x is to flip it across the y-axis, okay? So the algebra behind it is the rule. Okay, you will have to know these rules. But this is where that word opposite comes in handy, because a lot of times when we take a look at this rule, it gets a little bit confusing. So I'm going to read this rule to you, and I want you to just read it with me and then maybe repeat it to yourself a couple of times, okay? Reflection in the x-axis. Here's the rule. X, y becomes x opposite y. Okay, I'm going to read that again. XY becomes x opposite y. So you notice how this negative sign here, you probably want to say negative. please, please, please don't say that. When you see that in this rule, okay, in either one of these, the word is opposite, okay? So I'm gonna just write that again. I really want to emphasize the word opposite here, that we are not saying x negative y, we are saying x and then opposite y. So what this rule means is whatever your points are, the initial points, x and y, it will become x as it was before. X will stay the same. And then whatever y is, now it's the opposite. So if it was negative, it's now positive. If it was positive, it's now negative, okay? Now the next rule is to reflect across the y-axis. And this rule is xy becomes opposite x, y. xy becomes opposite x, y. Now what this is telling you is when you're reflecting across the y-axis, you'll take those initial points. You will first do the opposite of x, so whatever that x value was, now it's the opposite, but then y stays the same. There's no change to y, okay? So just a quick little note over here, they're showing you an example of this being reflected across either axis. So up here, if you take a look, we've got A, B, and C. This one is our original, okay? Original, old, whatever you want to call it, it's the figure. And they're showing you what it would look like if it's reflected across the x-axis, okay? If it's reflected across the x, it's going to go over that line, so it's going down, okay? Then it shows you if it's reflected across the y-axis, and if that happens, then it's going to go to the right, okay, across that y-axis. So it's showing you the two different reflections and where they would end up. If you look really closely, you'll see that when it's reflected across the x, it's got one apostrophe after it, noting that that's the figure, okay? But then if you look at the one at the top right, you see that it's got two marks next to it. That just shows that we've taken this shape and we have made two changes to it. So here's the first change and here's the second change, okay? So two different transformations, a reflection across the x and a reflection across the y. This one we would read as A double prime, B double prime, and C double prime. Over here we just have A prime, B prime, C prime, okay? You won't really need to know that part, but you might see it once or twice, so just keep that in mind, okay? All right, let's take a look at the next page. Give me a second to get there. And we'll look at the actual examples behind all of this stuff. Okay, so in our first example, it is telling us that we need to take the vertices. Vertices just means the points, okay, or the coordinates of a triangle, A, B, and C. We're going to draw the figure. Remember, the figure is the old one or the original, and its reflection, so the new one, okay, in the x-axis and the y-axis. So here we're going to do two different reflections with the same exact triangle, okay? Now we're going to do our very best to graph that here. I know that you can't see the grid lines, so we're just going to have to do our very best, okay? So on the first one, we're going to reflect across the x-axis. The first thing that you need is to plot the points, okay? So we're gonna plot the points as best as we can because I know we can't see the grid lines, okay? Our first point is 1, 1. So we're gonna start in the very center. Remember that your first movement is always left or right. In this case, it is right 1. And then the second movement is always up or down. In this case, it is up 1. So right 1, up 1, okay? We're gonna label that point A. The second point here is B, which is 1, 4. So start in the center and go right 1 and up to 4. And you're going to label that one B. And then the next one is 3, 4. So we will go start in the center, go right 3 and up 4. And then we will label that point C. Now they're telling us that this is a triangle, so we need to connect these points. Okay? So we're going to connect those points, but now we have to reflect it across the x-axis, okay? Now to do that, we need the rule. So if you take a look back at the front page, you need to find the rule for reflecting across the x-axis. I'm going to write that rule off to the right side of the grid here. Okay, so the rule for that is x, y becomes, or draw that arrow, x and then opposite y. This is our rule. So we're going to apply this rule to all of these points, but we're going to do it by actually listing them out and showing the change, okay? So we need A, B, and C. They've already given them to us. We don't have to go figure them out again. They're in the question. A is 1, 1. B is 1, 4. And C is 3, 4. Okay? So now what we do is we take these original points and we change them based on the rule. So what this rule is telling me is that I take the xy and it will become x opposite y. X stays the same, y is now the opposite. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to draw our little arrow here. But now our new points are labeled prime, right? Okay. And then let's change them. I know I'm on the graph over there a little bit. So the rule again is x opposite y. Remember that the first value in your ordered pair is x, so this one is staying as 1. That one does not change. And now my y, or the second number in my ordered pair, becomes the opposite, okay? So opposite of a 1 is a negative 1. Okay? We're going to do the same thing for the next point. X stays the same, so still 1. But now y becomes the opposite, so negative 4. Okay, then the next one we've got 3, 4. 3 will stay the same because that's our x, and the 4 will become the opposite. So the opposite of a positive 4 is now a negative 4. All right, and then the last step after that is to graph it. Okay, so we're going to go over here to our graph and we're going to graph those new points. We've got 1, negative 1, so we're going to go right 1, down 1, and that's our new A prime. Okay, then for B, we're going to go right 1 and down 4. And for C, we're going to go right 3 and down 4. So right 3, down 4. And what we should see here is a reflection of that original triangle across the x-axis. I'm going to bold the x-axis here to show you. It's basically like this kind of flipped over this line, okay? So that B was at the top, now it's flipped down to the bottom. C was at the top, now it's down at the bottom. The A was initially at the bottom of the triangle and now it's at the top. So everything has become the opposite. Same as our points here, okay? So now we're going to try the same exact thing with the same triangle in the second graph. But now in this case, it's going to be reflecting across the y-axis. So we can go ahead and kind of bold that y-axis line. Okay, bold that y-axis line, and then we still need to have our original points, which are up here in the question. So let's go ahead and replot those points. It's the same ones as before. So A is 1, 1. We'll go right 1, up 1. B is 1, 4. So right 1, up 4. And C is 3, 4. So we will go right 3, up 4, and plot that point there. Label it C. And connect our points. It's still the same triangle as before. Okay, no difference there. But now what's different is we're not reflecting across the x-axis. When we reflected across the x-axis, our figure flipped down across that x-axis line. But now we're going across the y-axis, so it should hopefully go to the left, okay? So let's find the rule. That's the next step. Find the rule and apply it to these points, all right? So the rule for this, again, it's on the front page, is xy becomes opposite x and then y. So in this case, it's a little bit different. In the last one, y was the opposite, but now in this one, x will be the opposite, okay? So let's write our original points, A, B, and C. and then we're going to change them according to the rule. A is 1, 1, B is 1, 4, and C is 3, 4. All of these are changing according to the rule. This rule, xy, becomes opposite x, y. So this first value in A is 1, and that's the x. This now becomes the opposite. So the opposite of a 1 is a negative 1. Okay, so A prime is now negative 1, but according to the rule, y stays the same. So negative 1, 1. Okay, B prime, x will become the opposite. So the opposite of a positive 1 again is a negative 1, but y stays the same. So 4. And the last one, we've got 3. That's our x. This needs to become the opposite. So now it is a negative 3. And then we've got 4 for our y value that stays the same. Okay. Very last thing here is to graph it. So let's graph it. Okay. My new A over here, is negative 1, 1. So you start in the center. Now we're going left 1, up 1. That's A prime. Okay. B prime is negative 1, 4. And C prime is negative 3, 4. Okay, and here we are. So now what we see is the same triangle reflected across the y-axis. So it just flipped over to the other side, okay? And this is it. The one thing that you really need to note when you're working with reflections is that it does not change size or shape. And the only thing that it does here is flip, okay? So still the same size, still the same shape, but it has just flipped, okay? I'm pretty sure this might have been where we stopped in the first lesson. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go down to the try it, okay? So pause this video and go to the bottom here. Give me a second. Go to the bottom here and do that try it, okay? So you're given 4 points this time, and you are asked to reflect it across the x and the y axis. So I will get you started here, okay? I'm gonna tell you that on this side, you can reflect it across the x axis, and on this side, you can reflect it across the y axis. You will need your original points, A, B, C, and D. Okay, and you need the rule. So the rule for the x-axis is xy becomes x opposite y. And then you'll write your original points and then change them into your A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime. Okay, and then you'll do the same thing over here for the y-axis. So you need your rule, xy becomes opposite x, y. You need A, B, C, and D, those originals. And then A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and work through these questions. And then what you can do after that is come back and check the work and see how you did, okay? So go ahead and pause. so here's this first one that you can check. Check your work and see how you did there. I'm gonna work through that second one, so give me just a second to get through that, and then you can see that one as well. I apologize for the background music and singing. Okay, here is the next part of that. So I apologize for the long wait. But here is the original and here is the new one. So go ahead and take a look at that. And then that is the end of the part 1 video. So I'm gonna stop that here, and then you can come back for the second video and get the rest, okay? This is a 2-day lesson, so this is the end of day 1, and we will get into day 2 in the second video. All right.